Good evening. This is a continuation of the Lane County Board of Commissioners regular meeting, which began for Commissioner Buck and I at 8 a.m. and for all the other commissioners at 9 a.m. And we are now resuming our meeting for a relatively rare evening meeting. We just have a couple of important items on the agenda for this evening. The first is our public comment. We're going to try to take as many people as we can until 6 p.m. And then at 6 p.m. we're going to take our public hearing on a matter that has been published on our agenda about the ordinance to extend to the block that we bought in January from the city of Eugene, formerly known as the Eugene City Hall block. And we'll be doing that. Then we'll be returning for any of you who haven't been able to get into our public comment. So we'll take people in the way they've signed up. And Mr. Brandt, please come forward. We're going to give everybody 3 minutes. So give your name, your address, and then our Vice Chair, Commissioner Buck, will start the timer, and we have the timer so that you can see at the end of 2 minutes and 30 seconds, the yellow light will come on, and then the red light will come on. So, welcome, Mr. Brandt.
Yeah, my name's Tom Brandt, live in Marcola. The first thing I'd like to talk about is recycling. You know, we finally got people recycling. And now a part of it, we want them to quit. Well, I say that we should let them keep recycling, take the plastics, which is a hard subject right now, bale them up, put them in the landfill, GPS them so we know where they are, because right now they're just mixed up in everything. One day we may have a solution for plastics. Now we don't. You know, you try to make a fuel out of it, it's too acid, it'll ruin the engines. And I also think that we may have to go back to like a Citizens Advisory Committee. I was on that years ago. And it was when we were planning Glenwood. And I had to force the recycling. We should probably get some people together to talk about recycling and solve some of these problems we have. Maybe follow the 1972 solid waste management plan. There's some things in there that people kind of forgot that I think would help us now. The other thing is homeless. You know, it's a big problem for everybody, just like the recycling. It would be nice for Lane County to be able to show the rest of the country how to do the recycling the right way, how to deal with the homeless the right way. And I think I have answers for both of them. Some of the answers are so simple that most people don't even see them. They're looking at all the big stuff, you know. But I think there needs to be, you know, a group to talk about the homeless and to solve the damn problems, you know. It's costing more money to put rocks under the bridges and bars around the bridges and the police moving them all out from place to place. It doesn't do anybody any good, and it costs a lot of money. I'd like to see you guys think about maybe getting 2 things going, recycling and start talking about it, you know? I mean, everybody talks about it, but nothing gets done. We need to get something done and be first in the nation and try to show everybody else how to do it. We did it with recycling. Recycling, we were really the first. So let's do it again.
Thank you very much. Next up is Deb McGee, followed by Becky Bruckner, followed by Sabrina Siegel. And please give your name and where you live, and we'll give you 3 minutes.
Great. My name is Deborah McGee. Lane County has been my home for 38 years. I worked as a counselor in the public schools for both Bethel and 4J, so I have deep roots in this community. And I'm dedicating the last chapter of my life to fighting the climate crisis. I want to start with a quote. "The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it." That was said by Robert Swan. He was born in England in 1956. He wrote a book called My Quest to Save the Last Wild Wilderness. And his claim to fame is that Robert Swan walked to both poles unassisted in order to bring attention to the climate crisis. So you might be thinking, oh, Deb McGee, that climate activist, she looked up this quote online. But no, I went to the dump. Right here. "The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it." Robert Swan. I read this recycling guide, Lane County 2019, cover to cover. It's great. And I'm really appreciative of the staffer who put that bold and truthful quote on the front of this recycling guide. I think that's really powerful. So as I know you know, Lane County's having a plastic roundup. You got your number 4 tubs and bottles, lids, your number 5 tubs and bottles. You have to separate everything. You have to cut off all the foil, cut off all the plastic. You got to get the gummy stuff off. And these are the greenhouse gas emissions that we're destroying the planet for a month's use, a week's worth of use, and even a moment. You know, this is all stuff. We throw it in the landfill, like the other gentleman said, it does not biodegrade. They're all made from fossil fuels, and then we wonder why we all get cancer. It's not a good product, I'm afraid. And frankly, it's a huge part of the greenhouse gas emissions that are heating up the planet. We know now that we're at 410 parts per million, and we know that 350 parts per million is the livable planet. So I just want to plant an idea that Lane County could be a leader in changing some of our consumption practices. We could work together to buy locally, in-season food. We could buy things from local craftspeople. We could eat less meat. We could not purchase things that are in plastic. We could buy glass or metal. And I just have to say that the scientists tell us we're running out of time, so it's time to act. And if people here want a Lane County climate action plan, I wish you'd stand up and let the county know that. We need a climate action plan. Lane County can join other cities and counties who are making a difference in reducing their greenhouse gases. We can do this together, and people want to. Thank you.
Thank you. And Becky Bruckner, followed by Sabrina Siegel, followed by Pam Driscoll.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm Becky Bruckner. I live in Eugene, and I have a letter here written to you advising the commissioners to halt the infrastructure of 5G in Lane County until there is proof that it is safe. The letter is written by lawyer Harry Lehman in Marin County. He is a veteran trial lawyer there. You may know him. They're really fighting 5G in Marin County. He wrote this today. He was kind of busy, but he wrote it. We've been in contact with him. And he asked me to give this to you, and then also the letter underneath it, written February the 21st. And he explains himself in here and how he feels about it, and actually what can be done here in Eugene about it, because they're doing it in Marin County. So I'm supposed to give one to each one of you. I have enough for all of you, except I'm short one. So it's like one of you won't get the February 21st letter, but you can share it. You can pass it around.
You can give it to Mr. Mokrajski.
Yes.
He'll give it to us.
There you go.
Thanks.
And so also, it'd be good to give you some educational materials about this. Things you could know right now would be that Brussels across the water has halted 5G, no 5G development. They're afraid of health reasons. And Harry Lehman, attorney, suggests that you read this, which is from the there's clear evidence of cancer, concludes the U.S. National Toxicology Program. There's clear evidence here. He'd like you to read that. And this one is a very highly esteemed doctor who testified about it, and there's 308 references in the back. This is another letter he would like you to read. And this is one that I obtained about oxidative mechanisms of biological activity of low-intensity radio frequency radiation. It's very difficult to read. You'd need to be almost a biologist, physicist, a very highly educated person in those areas to really understand it. But I read every word, and I do have some understanding of what it's saying. And it's just 100% proof of health risk. It's called oxidative stress. You can read that. Like I said, I'm warning you, it's not easy to read because of the medical, it's the way that academics talk amongst themselves and in scientific laboratories. So it's hard to read, but worth it. This is a bibliography you can read to get you in contact with good sites. The Environmental Health Trust is excellent, peer-reviewed science. And Environmental Health Trust, Dr. Hero came here last week and spoke to us. He also spoke in Salem at the legislature and in Portland at the school board about Wi-Fi in schools. He's a toxicology expert from McGill University, expert in this field worldwide. And this would be good for information for you to look up to. And this one is how wireless made us think.
Ma'am, could you wrap up your comments, because you're over our 3 minutes?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Okay.
I thought it would buzz at me.
It's silently buzzing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know.
That's okay.
I haven't been here before.
No, thank you, and
So
thanks
this
for your...
would be an educational thing.
And thank you so much for your public comment.
Okay.
We're going to call on Ms. Siegel, Sabrina Siegel, followed by Pam Driscoll, followed by Linda Perrine, if I said your name right, Perrine.
Hello, Council. My name is Sabrina Siegel, and I live in Eugene. I've come here today as a resident and homeowner in Eugene to bring your attention to the gravely dangerous situation that we are in right now. Should 5G infrastructure continue deployment and be activated, cellular units are being installed in front of homes and schools right now, in front of schools and homes without any form of public notification or input. There's one in front of South High School. There's one in front of several elementary schools and middle schools. Radiation danger, it even says it on the unit, radiation danger on the unit that's in front of the school. Through the years, we have been misled by industry. The telecoms and manufacturers of wireless technology have normalized and promoted this technology without alerting us to the magnitude of its biological effects on humans and the environment, akin to the history of tobacco and asbestos and DDT, which was sprayed liberally on bodies without any care. You probably remember seeing footage of children, playing in it, and now we know how toxic and dangerous it is. And this is even more dangerous without anybody really having this knowledge. Now here is a vast amount of there is a vast amount of peer-reviewed science revealing biological effect from low-level non-ionizing radiation. There are thousands, literally thousands of studies. The Environmental Health Trust and PubMed are reliable sources to look at for these studies. These studies show DNA breakage, oxidative cellular stress, cancer, diseases ranging from diabetes to Alzheimer's, and what is it that children have? Autism, yes. The newest data from the U.S. National Toxicology Program shows clear evidence of cancer by expert panel. Representative Blumenthal, Eshu, and others have demanded that the FCC prove the safety of 5G. In a congressional hearing, the FCC and telecom testified that they could not prove the safety, nor could they produce any study. They said this, they can't produce any study on biological safety or have done any studies on biological safety. It's absolutely outrageous, really. Why is 5G being installed in our city when not proven safe, and there are thousands of peer-reviewed studies showing harm? We want an emergency moratorium on 5G adopted immediately. Thank you. And here I have the international appeal from over 200 scientists appealing to world governments. It's annotated with studies. Here's a lawsuit of someone involved in this appeal suing the city of Santa Fe, the United States, and the FCC. This is a beautiful lawsuit here. You could read it.
And thank you for your
health dangers for children. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for listening.
Okay, and next up would be Pam Driscoll, followed by Linda Perrine, followed by Fred Mallory. And could you move the warning lights there? That'd be great. Thank you. The silent buzzing.
Okay, my name is Pam Driscoll. I live in Dexter, and Heather Buck is my representative. Thank you for having this meeting at 5:30. I do think if you had it at 7, more people could come that are living in Lane County, since, like, if you get off work at 5 and you live in Cottage Grove, probably wouldn't make the 5:30 meeting. So you guys just start a little later, right? Come in at 10, 11, plan for a late day. And I also had to work today. Thank you. I made some money. That's a good thing. I agree with the 5G concerns. I've read a little bit about it, and I know people who are sensitive to electromagnetic frequencies. It's real. It's dangerous. I also am a special needs teacher, and the rate of autism and behavioral challenges with children has gone through the roof. That's what I did today, work with some of these kids. So we need a climate action plan, right? Eugene has a climate action plan. Lane County needs a climate action plan. First thing we need to do is drop out of the Association of ONC Counties. $107,000 we paid in dues to be part of a group that basically wants to log our public forests, which are one of the best forests in the world for carbon sequestration. We already have the Association of Oregon Counties, which also includes health and safety issues. So it's redundant, and it's also, they don't work for us. They're basically a lobbying organization for the timber industry. So please drop out of that and have a meeting. And I know Joe said he was going to come get some information on where what the Association of ONC Counties does, which I pretty much know, but I hope you find out. Okay, so we need a climate action plan in Lane County. We need sustainable green building. If we vote for this courthouse, it should be green building, sustainable, extra insulation, solar-facing, south-facing, solar-facing windows. It should have solar panels. We should be reducing our energy costs over this building. And when I walk around this building, from what I heard, the new county courthouse is going to be twice the size of this one. And we need 2 more courtrooms, and we need it so that the victims and the accused don't have to see each other. It seems to me when you walk up in the hallways up there, they're pretty vacuous. I don't think it needs to be twice the size of this building. I think it needs to be better designed, and it needs to be green, sustainable building. It just makes sense. We have to do everything in our power at all levels of government to deal with climate change. We have to lower our energy consumption, and we have to get local food security. We could take that $107,000 we're paying to the Association of ONC Counties, and we could help our local organic farmers to do organic regenerative family farming. I'm sure they would really appreciate that. The more local we eat, the healthier we are, the more food we can provide, because we are headed towards. All right, so the groundwater aquifer that runs through below California Central Valley, which is responsible for more than 1/3 of the world's food supply.
Thank you for your public comment.
Oh, I have 9 seconds. Oh, I'm over.
You're over.
Anyways,
That means
that
you've
aquifer
taken
is
someone else's
depleted.
9
It
seconds.
goes so fast.
I know.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, and let's see, Ms. Perrine, followed by Mr. Mallory, followed by Todd Boyle. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Linda Perrine. I run my own organic farm in Heather Bucks District for the last 11 years in Lane County. City of Eugene started a climate action plan in September of 2010. Lane County's late to this challenge. I've helped document 350 Eugene's suggested action priorities to the City of Eugene's Climate Action Plan 2.0, along with several others here. So I'm pretty familiar with what's in the CAP. The top four priorities in nearly all CAPs are: 1, transportation, including LTD, ride and car share, EVs, walk, bike, and safety. And on a side note, 350 Eugene is hosting a town hall focused on transportation on April 11th in Eugene at First Methodist Church. We hope some of you can attend. Number 2, decarbonizing energy sources, solar and wind to complement hydro. When hydro is insufficient, Lane County gets its energy from natural gas. We need to get Lane County electric utility boards working to expand solar wind sources now. 70 to 80% hydro dependency in this county is a risk with climate change. Hydro should be used as an anytime day backup source when solar and wind are not available. 3, energy efficiency in commercial and residential buildings with a goal of net zero building codes. And 4, restoring and enhancing free carbon cycling services through forestry and agriculture. That includes more local food production and consumption using organic methods, replanting trees to unused farmland, and transitioning clear cuts to selective harvest, speeding up replants of the clear cuts. Additionally, we need a climate resiliency plan that includes water use planning for drought seasons, transitioning the economy to non-growth, sustainable for the long term, taxing policy to generate clear-cut taxes that move industry to sustainable harvest. County should maximize all the solar energy coming to it. Counties should be sourcing more wind energy from within Oregon. Creating jobs to address climate change work must be a top priority for the Board of Commissioners. If the county wants the voters to approve the county courthouse bond measure that's coming up, we expect the county to step up its actions on climate change. Tie these two issues together, similar to Community Benefits Fund. We should be having a community climate fund to parallel that. Lane County needs a climate action plan. 350 Eugene is ready and willing to help. And I want to echo the others that really appreciate the 5:30 public comment period. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next up is Fred Mallory, followed by Todd Boyle, followed by at least one Eugene Raging Granny.
I'm back. I'm back with to support what these folks have, Linda and Debbie and Pamela, and have said about climate change. It's serious. Let me just kind of back up a little bit. When you are not feeling well, your health is bad, how do you know that you're not feeling well? You take your temperature, and your temperature indicates that your body is unhealthy. That's a kind of a scientific way to know what you already know because you're unhealthy. It has worked. It has worked forever. And in parallel to that, what happens when this Earth is sick? We take its temperature. That is, we can now read with the carbon, the parts per million, and we have a very, very clear idea that the Earth is sick. So, in support of these ideas, I want to say that it's real. The carbon crisis, the Earth is sick. It's real. So now we want to move on to what are we going to do about that? That's been my speech every time. What are we going to do? Well, 350 is coming up with a lot of ideas. Other places around, other groups around are coming up with ideas. Stay tuned. I'll be back.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, so welcome, Mr. Boyle, followed by the Raging Grannies, followed by Jim New, followed by David Babcock. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Todd Boyle, change channels to a different subject, low-income housing. So only one point that I really want to make tonight for people to really think more about is the scale of how much low-income housing is needed. There are 36,000 people in Eugene living on less than $1,000 a month, and 35% of their income would be $350 a month of rent they can afford, and then that would translate into about a $50,000 capital cost per unit of building low-income housing. And that would be the highest income person among those 36,000. So there's 18,000 of them who lives on less than $700 a month, let's say. And in the county, it's 1.5 times larger. So when you start thinking of on scale of 50,000 people who can only afford rent of $350 a month or less, that means that they're out of the market already because there isn't anything that cheap anymore. So really there's just a slow train wreck in process that's happening, and we're all experiencing the results of that in terms of family stress, societal stress, alcoholism, conflict, assaults and robberies and everything. And these are not without cause. These are well-studied sociological results of poverty and stress. So if you have this huge number of 50,000, so let's just think about what the public sector's housing, first of all, the private sector is not going to build it for these people. It's not possible to build housing for $50,000 per unit. Why would they do that if they've got people lined up to pay $250,000? So they don't. The private sector is never going to solve this by itself without incentives. And the public sector is building at $250,000 per unit, more or less, in River Road affordable housing and other recent developments. So that'd be $1 million to build 4 units. 4 units, and the $1 million a year is what the CET tax that they're just sweating bullets over for the last year. We're going to try to get $1 million of CET tax for 4 units. We got 50,000 people. The scale of the thing is just so, it just gives me a headache thinking about how different, how large the problem is compared to what the solutions that people are talking about. And I don't know what you guys are going to do, not personally speaking, but institutionally. The only thing that I would caution is that the staffs who are working all the time to develop public housing solutions are never going to admit to you that they're only solving 4 units out of 50,000 units. That's not in their job description to explain the proportions here. And I'm asking for humility from all of your staffs, county and city, that you're never going to build 40,000 units. And I'm asking for humility and some acceptance that we have to reduce the barriers and let people solve their own problem. Let them build tiny houses. Let them live in RVs and driveways. Let them house themselves. Don't drive them out of the street homeless. Let's have some humility and at least let people house ourselves. That's what I'm asking for, because the scale is just too big.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I guess we're going to have a 3-minute presentation. Are we going to have someone introduce yourselves, or what are we going to do here?
You'll introduce us, Jeff.
They know what they're doing.
We're the Raging Grannies, and we're from all over Lane County. Twas the night of the Lane County Commissioners' public hearing, and all through the town were loser conversations. You know, loser conversations, conversations about the environment that don't go anywhere. People are talking, but nobody's listening. So really, there's no communications going on. They go like this.
Yes, let's talk about climate change.
Blah, 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 blah. Buy less plastic stuff. Blah, 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 blah. How much is enough? Blah, 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 blah. You hear this sound. Blah, 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 blah. We live on common ground. Some folks want to argue. Some folks want to yell. We just want solutions to make our planet well. Blah, 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 blah. Are you scared of the weather? Blah, 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 blah. We're all in this together. Blah, 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 blah. We'll listen to you. Blah, 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 blah. If you listen to, tell us your issues. What are your concerns? Maybe we can help us all before our planet burns.
And then little by little, in quiet conversations, ears and minds open, and change begins.
I am listening.
I am listening.
I'm all ears.
I'm all ears.
Tell me what you're thinking.
Tell me what you're thinking.
Let's face our fears.
Let's face our fears. The more we listen, the more we learn the things we need to know to make a better world. Let's hear what a loser conversation sounds like.
Ah, I had to drive all over finding a parking place. It took me 10 minutes. The traffic was terrible today.
You shouldn't be driving anyway, spewing CO2 into our atmosphere. You're destroying our planet. Parking is the least of your problems. Shame on you. You don't care. Every time you drive, you kill a polar bear.
Now, let's hear it another way.
I was driving around for 10 minutes trying to find a parking place. The traffic was just terrible today.
I know. That's why I'm really glad I took the bus. Have you gotten your free senior bus pass yet?
I haven't.
I'll go with you.
Oh, thank you. Let's make a date.
All right.
Please listen to the grannies.
Where you sit together with your ears open wide, listening to grannies standing side by side. We're singing for our planet with the hope we found. Let's all stand together here on common ground. Let's all stand together here on common ground.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your extraordinary public comment. And we're going to switch over. So, Mr. New, you're going to have to wait until we finish our 6 o'clock business here. I don't know how long it's going to take, but we'll come back to our public comment for anyone that wants to continue on the sign-up sheet. And at this time, I'm going to read the item and then see if we have some people that have signed up for it. So this is item 5A on our agenda. It's the second reading and public hearing on ordinance 19-02 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 8 to bring the rules governing public property in downtown Eugene into alignment and declaring an emergency. With us to talk about this is Mr. Steve Dingle, making his way to the table. And for the benefit of the public, we've set this up as what we call a 5/10 item, meaning the staff will have 5 minutes to present this item, and then commissioners will have time to ask questions, and we'll have a public hearing. We have 3 people signed up for the public hearing. And so I just wanted to introduce this by saying, as I understand it, this proposed ordinance would exclude the public from the area now known as the courthouse site, formerly known as the Eugene City Hall site. That is currently a construction area that the county bought from the city in January of this year and is surrounded by a fence to keep the public safe and outside of the area where the construction's occurring, where a parking area is going to be put in temporarily until such time as funding is obtained to build a courthouse. This ordinance excludes the public from that area from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. and does a few other things. Please add to this in your presentation.
This just brings this in line with the other ordinance that was passed to make everything consistent. The only thing that had to be different here was the piece about the vehicles, because it's anticipated that there's going to be people parking there, so they are paying for parking. So it's possible that people might be there before 6 p.m. or 6 a.m. before 6 a.m. or after 11 p.m. because they work for the county. For example, they work graveyard in the sheriff's office. So that's the only reason that the language is different. And again, this was done after the other one was done before the property exchange was finalized with the city.
Okay. Any questions from commissioners before we have the public hearing? I'll just note that Commissioner Burney has to go to another meeting at 6:15, so if he walks out in the middle of what I'm talking about, it's not a commentary on what I'm saying, or if he walks out when you're speaking, it's also not a commentary. So
hopefully there'll be an opportunity to address.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So we have 3 people signed up, and we'll do the same 3-minute comments. So Mr. McFadden, come forward. You've signed up first, Mr. Kerrigan, and then Brian Michaels. And please give your name and where you're from, and our vice chair will set the timer for 3 minutes. It'll come on at 1 minute, at 30 seconds to go at the yellow.
All right, thank you for the opportunity to give testimony on this topic. My name is Mike McFadden. I live in Ward 1 in Eugene. And I just really want to let you all know that I strongly oppose this language that Mr. Dingell is proposing to you all, or I suppose maybe he had help drafting it, so it's not like I'm blaming him or anything. But here's why I just oppose this. This is wrong. This is an abusive process. There's not an emergency, and I feel like the emergency part of this situation is only being cited in order to accelerate the timetable at which the actual curfew could be adopted. Whether or not the curfew is implemented by the board is another thing, but you know, the route to getting there with the normal process for adopting ordinances would have served just fine. And you know, I think that, you know, the using of the emergency clause to pass this quicker or to even designate this as an emergency is insulting. This is not an emergency. And so to call it that in order to you know, take advantage of certain aspects of the process under the emergency situation is just wrong. And so I just want to point that out. And you know, I think that, you know, this kind of strategy or this kind of tactic, it really just underscores and points out how this is really aimed at frustrating and curtailing protest activities in the downtown area in general. I think, you know, like I spoke about this morning, it kind of stemmed from an initial set of protests that happened out on the Free Speech Plaza. And you know, I told you a bit about my involvement with that situation. And in the trial where I was fighting my trespass charges, you know, it was brought up how, you know, the Board of Commissioners was okay to, through their emergency powers, close down the plaza because it was content neutral and that, you know, the board had the right to impose time, place, and manner restrictions on people's speech. And so, you know, I feel like this is just a continuation of the same kind of tactics to, you know, chill and frustrate people's protesting and availing themselves of their First Amendment rights here in the county. And so, you know, I don't necessarily oppose a curfew or, like I was saying this morning, structured rules around that parking space, especially because it is a construction site. But using the emergency route to get there is totally inappropriate and wrong, and I just think it's shameful. So shame on Mr. Dingell.
Okay, thank you for your public comment. Michael Kerrigan, you'll be given 3 minutes after you give your name and where you live.
Yeah, my name is Michael Kerrigan, and I live in Ward 7 in Commissioner Sorensen's district. We need more housing, more shelter options in this community. I'm sorry you have to choose to extend the curfew at the Eugene City Hall site. I understand it's going to be a construction site coming up, but we need to find more safe places for folks to be downtown and throughout our community. You know, folks really, like I said, need. I mean, not just downtown, but throughout the town. And I think a key thing is also a safe place to protest. And I had a good conversation with Commissioner Sorensen before tonight, And I strongly support the idea of opening Free Speech Plaza again, where folks like me and others can express our political opinion 24 hours a day. So I urge you to do that. And the real emergency right now is the lack of housing, the lack of safe places to be. I live in the Whitaker neighborhood, which I love. I work and I live there. But there's such a strong need. So I urge you to do more to create the affordable housing, but also safe places for people throughout Lane County and especially in downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Michaels, come forward. Please give your name and your address, and you'll be given 3 minutes. Welcome.
My name is Brian Michaels. I'm an attorney here in Eugene. I believe I sent to each of you earlier today a series of emails and letters that were involved in an ordinance that was passed in December of 2015. I believe that ordinance is the spearhead of a series of these ordinances that are designed at heart to suppress speech that people do not agree with. Now, for example, the article that told me about this hearing today, after talking about closing down the Wayne Morse Free Speech Plaza and then the Butterfly parking lot, the author of this, and I do not know who that is, said, protesters have camped at both locations to protest the local government's treatment of the homeless. It appears the county is seeking to get ahead of any potential protests once the block's fences come down. That is what you're doing. You're getting ahead of protests so you can suppress protests. That war woman got it right. Now, at the heart of these ordinances is obviously an intent to suppress speech. And in the material I sent you, I talked about the case of Ali Valkyrie, because Ali Valkyrie really shines a bright light on the heart, all puns intended, of how these ordinances come to pass. Now, attached to the letter were emails. The first email by Mr. Dingell was to find out from Leanne Richardson how she wanted to deal with Miss Valkyrie. Miss Valkyrie was a young woman who had been vocal in a protest about homeless people. Here's the key, or one of the three keys. If you look at this, Mr. Dingell, under importance, says hi. Your counsel is saying it's of high importance to keep this one young woman out of the county building and to suppress her speech. That's the heart of all this. And then he goes on to talk about how he doesn't want her to attend the name clearing of Mark Cardell, who you may know just successfully sued you guys based on the actions of Miss Leanne Richardson and Mr. Dingell. He won a pretty substantial award. Well, I know Mark Cardell, and I still do, so I was going to this name clearing hearing myself. And so as her attorney, I went with her. The serious irony here is this. A name clearing hearing does not have public input. So if she's attending, he's trying to get her to not attend this name clearing hearing, to be banished from this courthouse. And yet she couldn't even say anything at this name clearing hearing. He didn't even want her to sit and watch. That should tell you everything you need to know about why these curfew and protest suppression ordinances are being pursued. We have 2 new commissioners. You can reverse this trend.
Thanks very much for your public comment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So is there anyone who has not signed up for the public hearing who wishes to present any testimony on this ordinance? You are not on there. Maybe you're, nope, you're not. Go ahead. Yeah, you're on the general public comment. So I'll just say it one more time. Is there anyone that has not presented public testimony on the proposed ordinance that we're about to discuss? Okay, so hearing none, we will now close our public hearing and turn to the board for questions of legal counsel and otherwise. And I'll just start off by saying, I know that the emergency clause was used in the other ordinances as well. Given the fact that that issue was raised in the public hearing about whether or not an emergency exists, what is the drawback of deleting the emergency clause and allowing the public to have their otherwise rights to contest the ordinance?
Well, here's what I would say is that, number one, this is the ordinary ordinance process. I mean, it follows the charter and the period. The reason that this was put in with an emergency clause is it was thought that we were going to be further along with the
parking.
The roll park was going to be done, because that's the conflict. Once we lease those spaces, they belong to the people who lease them.
Correct.
So obviously that, as I understand it from the facilities meeting yesterday, that roll park is not going to be put out in the next 30 days or whatever it is.
So the reason it was originally drafted as with emergency clauses because we thought the facilities people would have the roll park, which is a substance almost like a AstroTurf that you can park where parking can occur, and the county would receive income from that.
Well, and the issue there is the conflict, because we become contractually obligated when we lease.
But doesn't it appear that if we deleted the emergency clause and the public would otherwise, it would still be within the time period?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
May I make a comment?
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make a comment not related to this item because I have to leave, and I apologize profusely for that. And I do want to share that this is, for me, part of the dilemma, because after a public testimony, I'd love to respond, right? So here's what I would like to share. I understand the angst of feeling like you can't fight City Hall, and does an elected body truly represent the people it's supposed to represent? It's why I ran for office at the age of 65 after leaving a career in clean energy, commercial and industrial retrofits, where our stellar project of over 140 million solar and battery installations was the country's currently largest net zero plus facility in the United States. I did that because I internalized what you are saying, and yet I didn't feel like talking. I felt like doing something. In the last, I think our board has different views of climate change. Mine is I want to push for a climate action plan soon. However, I'm waiting until the May 21st ballot initiative because this will open up some other issues internally. And honestly, I think we live in such a precipitous times where my wife, who's a dancing granny with our 2 dancing grandchildren right now as I speak, we're watching on HD TV and living color what feels like the disintegration of so many social safety supports as well as environmental concerns. So I would like to share that while we've been talking, and thank you for giving me this time before I leave, 45 minutes into it, so that you're aware, the world has emitted over 7 billion tons of carbon into the atmosphere. That's the immensity and the proportion we're dealing with. So I think we're at a point where rather than fighting each other all the time, I'm looking to bring people forward together as quickly as possible. We will have heated discussions internally when some of us want to argue about climate change, pro and con, and I will say constantly, I don't want to debate climate change or whether the earth is round or flat. I want to look at what's possible to do. So I would like to share, for those of you that don't know, that this body has unanimously, for the first time ever, tied environmental concerns with building. Now, this is coming from the voice of someone who's built a net zero plus facility, 144,000 square foot campus, which trains 13,000 apprentice electricians every year in the Los Angeles basin. And this board unanimously has identified that for a starter for this courthouse building, many people are concerned with a justice building. I am too, but I'm also concerned with building justice. And this group has identified by board order, amongst other things, living wages for the people that are contracted with to do this work and their subcontractors. Prioritize their providing full family health insurance to the people that work. Targeting the money locally, so you're not having out-of-state and out-of-area people coming in building, blah, 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 blah. And 2, environmental things. 1, dealing with clean energy, and at least first, we literally, by board order, if this approves, are going to be looking at that and having the most decreased carbon footprint possible. So I just want to share that I share your concerns. I appreciate being able to say this now, and please forgive me. It's not out of disrespect that I have to leave. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner Berney. So the matter at hand is this ordinance, and we've had the public hearing, had some comments by me, but I'd like to call on anybody else who wants to raise their left hand, Commissioner.
Sorry, I keep forgetting it's supposed to be left hand. I'm
Yes.
right-handed.
Yeah, very good.
So, Mr. Dingell, I just want to ask the question real quick. When would the ordinance take effect if we remove the emergency clause? If it doesn't get, signatures collected and all that?
I think it's 30 days or 60 days. Is it 30 days?
Is it 30 days? Is that far enough in advance of any possible leasing of spaces?
It's my understanding, based on what I heard yesterday of facilities, that would work.
So it'd be pretty easy for us to amend this tonight, just to say we're passing it without emergency clause. Because I can say I dislike emergency clauses, and I've spoken at the legislature about attaching emergency clauses to everything. And in fact, some of my testimony against bills that had emergency clauses were construed as just being generally against the bill sometimes, and has been repeated in public comment here sometimes, misconstruing comments about amending the bill to remove emergency clauses being against a bill. So I would support, if we move forward with this, removing the emergency clause. And I think, the need to be able to assure the company that we're going to contract with to do the leasing and running of that parking area, and the folks that ultimately purchase those leases from that company, that those spaces will be available on a daily basis. The need to have a curfew on that property is kind of part of that. And it has nothing to do with speech. It's about just making sure that the property rights of those folks that purchase those leases are protected.
Hey, a left-handed signal. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Mr. Dingell or Mr. Mokrzycki, the parking areas we have surrounding LCBH, Lane County Behavioral Health, what's the designation of those at night? Are they off limits at night?
I believe that they're part of the general thing where we say, which is any county property that.
I knew the answer to that, but I wanted to say it out loud. However, we do have a provision with those parking lots, Mr. Mokrzycki, where we do allow overnight parking at certain times of the year, some of it year-round, and it is it's monitored. It's also it's not licensed, but it's approved parking. So my question then is, the spaces around LCBH typically are not leased spaces. They're for whoever works there, whoever happens to be visiting LCBH. Same with the Serbu Center. But those parking lots, if you go there at night, other than during football season when sometimes people are there at night, those parking lots are empty other than the people who are camping there. And I think we're currently allowing 18 campers, which are overnight. They leave during the daytime to allow for parking. So my question then would be, what would it take? We're starting a new parking lot here, even though it does not have a permanent, so to speak, surface. It's got a surface that is not designed to last forever. At some point, whatever we do moving forward, I'm going to be talking about how do we allow for overnight camping in the same program that we are using to allow overnight parking at LCBH and on other parking lots. It's a program that does work. It's monitored and administered by St. Vincent de Paul, and we do. It's a program that has provides some relief for people who are homeless who do have movable vehicles.
Chair Sorensen, Commissioner Farr, you wouldn't have to do anything with the ordinance, because the ordinance, you'll note, says unless they're otherwise authorized.
Right.
That is something that I would strongly suggest that you address before we begin issuing leases to people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in other words, technically, when you lease one of these parking spots, you've got it 24 hours a day. Now, obviously, most people don't use them 24 hours a day, but I would strongly suggest that we put in the agreement that maybe a certain number of those spots folks know will not be available from, you're renting this, parking spot 237, it will not be available to you between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. or so.
Typically they're in a not a cordoned off area, but a specific area where the campers are spending is in one block of parking. I believe we have 2 blocks out there right now, but they do move at, I believe 7 a.m. is the time that they do leave in the morning.
And if you get here early in the morning,
yeah.
You look in the butterfly lot, for example, you will find
some people.
There's 8, 10, 12 cars there.
And the same with LCBH, they allow flexible hours. So then I'm looking at the 6.025, and the words in there do say unless otherwise authorized. So clearly we do have the ability to authorize parking by, once again, it's not by license, but it is by permit.
Well, it would just be with the, like I said, the one thing you'd want to do is you'd want to make sure that the people, that it's clear in whatever our agreement is with the people who are leasing the parking spots, that they understand that. But other than that, it would, easy enough. Mr. Mokrahajski has authority over county property. He can authorize it.
Very good. Then that answers the questions that I have regarding how do we make certain that we're able to, once again, ease the camping and overnight sleeping situation for a few people as we continue to march on a broader approach. And I have words from Mr. Brandt when we get to the comments on the regular public comment session. Mr. Brandt, who was talking about homelessness and that we should, I think he wanted to form a committee to work on homelessness. Thank you.
I would support the removal of the emergency clause, given the discussion that we've had this evening. And just wanted to address Mr. Kerrigan's comments about the absolute need for shelter and housing all over the community. I 100% agree with that comment, and it's not just, the core of Eugene or the core metro area of Eugene and Springfield. That's something that I'm determined to find solutions for throughout the entire county, including our rural areas. But I thank you for continuing to bring the subject up. We are working on solutions. We are currently starting our implementation of our TAC report regarding broader aspects of coordination of services for housing and homelessness. And I'm on that committee, and I look forward to bringing that to the board when we're done with that and trying to move forward towards solid steps that will make a big difference in housing and homelessness in our community.
Thank you very much. I'll just say that, taking the emergency clause out of the proposed ordinance would be a better thing in light of everything. The clause that is currently in the proposal is, an emergency is hereby declared to exist in this ordinance being enacted by board in exercise of its police power for the purpose of meeting such emergency, and the immediate preservation of the public peace, health, and safety takes place immediately. That's standard language for any emergency that a city, a county, or the state of Oregon through its legislature takes to enact a piece of legislation immediately, rather than waiting for the public's right to challenge that legislation. that we have in our Oregon Constitution. So I think that you're hearing a pretty strong view from all the commissioners that there really isn't an emergency. There might have been one, but there now isn't one. So we don't like to enact ordinances with emergency clauses if we don't have to. So I think that'll be taken out when someone makes a motion up here. What I would like to ask Mr. Dingell is that the heart of the thing for me isn't excluding people from a parking lot, it's excluding people from the free speech plaza. And when the board did take emergency action to exclude homeless protesters from the free speech plaza, it was my view, at least at the time, that was excluding people who were trying to bring a message that the government was not doing enough about the homeless problem. And I agree currently the government is not doing enough at the federal, state, or local level to deal with the homeless problem. But the legal issue for me was, why are we excluding people that are protesting in front of a current county courthouse? And I didn't feel that was a good thing, and I voted no on it. Now I do see the need for this ordinance, because this isn't excluding people from a courthouse yet. It's excluding people from a construction site where a parking lot will be built and where parking will be leased to people, and I see that as a reasonable thing to do. But I want to know if it's appropriate to get an amendment to this proposed ordinance, not only deleting the emergency clause, but also revisiting the exclusion of people from the very clearly defined part of the Lane County courthouse block where people should, in my view, be able to protest around the clock and not just within the hours of 6 a.m. and 11 p.m. So how could we accomplish that if we wanted to?
So I would not recommend doing that. I'd have to go back and look, but I believe that actually the ordinance that you're referring to was actually directly related to, and it was part of the ordinance surrounding the free speech plaza. To me, it wouldn't make any sense logically.
So it's a separate ordinance, in your view?
Yes, it was in a different.
Okay.
It's in it. There's actually, I believe, there's actually a part of the code that actually deals with the Wayne Morris Terrace and free speech plaza.
Okay, so can we get a motion then to approve what appears the board is going to agree to?
Wrong hand.
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner.
So I'd like to move approval of ordinance number 1902, amending it to remove the last paragraph concerning declaring an emergency.
Okay. Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Bozievich and seconded by Commissioner Buck to approve the ordinance as proposed with the exception of the deletion of the emergency clause that's in the proposed ordinance. Further debate and comments on that? I'll just say that I do plan on voting for this, but I would like the board to revisit the exclusion of people from the the Free Speech Plaza for reasons I've talked about. And I'm voting for this because we did delete the emergency clause. And I would also like to revisit this ordinance in the event that the public does authorize the funding, the state authorizes the funding, and that we make a courthouse out of that square. And if that comes to pass, I'd like to revisit this ordinance.
Well, obviously, it would have to.
Would have to. Okay. Okay. Very good. So, seeing no further discussion, we'll go to a vote. We'll ask Mr. Mokrzycki to poll the board. Just for the public's benefit, when we vote most of the time, it's just a voice vote. It's to approve board orders, which we are allowed to do under the charter by voice vote. But when it comes to ordinances, we have to have the someone actually ask each commissioner how they're going to vote.
Commissioner Bozievich?
Aye.
Commissioner Buck?
Aye.
Commissioner Farr?
Aye.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Aye. So the ordinance is adopted on a 4-0 vote. Commissioner Burney is excused. and the ordinance as amended is approved. Now, Ms. Jones gave me the ordinance and told me if the board approved it, I could sign it. Mr. Dingle, should I just give this back to you so we can get a reprinted version of this?
Yes, I can take
Okay, why don't you take that and then tell her that I didn't sign it, and I want to be excused from anything that she does to me, any wrath, right? Any wrath from our board coordinator. Okay, so let's now go back to our public comment. We left off with Mr. New. So if you're here, Mr. New is here. So please come forward and give us your name and where you're from, and our Vice Chair will set the timer at 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Jim New. I live in Ward 7. I want to thank you for having this meeting at 5:30, and thank you for breaking up the public comment so I didn't have to follow right behind the Raging Grannies. Tough group to follow. A 2011 Oregon survey reported more than 70% of the citizens believe that climate change is caused by humans burning fossil fuels and that long-term impacts will be catastrophic. At a recent 350 Climate Town Hall, the community crowd of over 250 people sourced and prioritized a county climate action plan. Lane County is already feeling the effects of climate change with less than average snowpack, warmer river temperatures from less runoff, drier forests resulting in more wildfires, longer and hotter summers, and extreme weather events such as the last month's snowstorm. Providing warming, cooling, and air quality centers will challenge the county financially and socially. A county climate action plan and advisory board should be developed to provide direction on adaptation and mitigation procedures. This should be a consensual task for county commissioners with bipartisan support. The World Meteorological Organization reported the 20 warmest years on record have occurred in the past 22 years. The hottest 4 have come in the last 4 years. We are past the point of debating, denying, and doubting. Does the county even have numbers as to the county-wide fossil fuel emissions or sector-based or consumption-based greenhouse gas emissions? Do you know those numbers? Shaking your head, no. We and you should be able to report those numbers when asked. That would let the public know the commissioners are serious about addressing climate change in Lane County. Whatever happened to January 28th, the effects of climate change on Lane County presentation by Ernie Niami? He was supposed to give it then. We haven't heard it or seen it since. In January, Mr. Farr invited the public to view pictures of his grandson after the commission meeting. A proud grandparent for sure, confident that his grandson's future would be safe and secure, but continuing on our current course of fossil fuel consumption will jeopardize his future and be far from healthy and safe. Everything that is worth doing is hard and takes longer than you think. Fighting climate change and the deniers meets those conditions just as suffrage, civil rights, and Social Security and Medicare did. The citizens of Lane County request our policymakers that focus on making immediate significant changes that will mitigate climate change and protect health and safety of its citizens. A county climate action plan and county climate advisory board would be significant first steps in securing a livable future for us and our future grandchildren. Thank you.
We use they and them as pronouns.
Thank you.
We use they and them as pronouns, not he.
Thanks so much, Mr. New. And now up with Mr. Babcock, and followed by Mike. You wrote your name, and I forgot your name.
McFadden.
Mike McFadden. So, and then Robin Bloomgarden after Mike McFadden. So welcome, Mr. Babcock.
Thank you. My name's David Babcock. I live in West Lane County, sorry, Elmira. I don't have a speech. I just want to say a few things that I really appreciate you having a later meeting so that more people who are in the working world can come. Number two, I feel like the county commissioners are listening to the people, and I feel like for the first time we have a body that is paying attention because of the current situation on our planet. And I'm really encouraged to feel that you're going to work together and listen to us and work with us because you're you're just like the rest of us. We're all in this together. So I appreciate that. I wanted to just reiterate what the Raging Granny said and what Bernie said about the importance of understanding and listening to each other and working together. I also would like to encourage you to contact all of your the constituents in Oregon to help the HB 926 stop aerial spraying over state-owned forest land. My personal belief is that we start small. We start with our city and our county, and then we go to our state, and someday maybe the federal government will work with us. But I just want to thank you for listening to us and having eye contact and feeling like you really care about what we have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. McFadden, Ms. Bloomgarden, is Mr. McLean still here? Nope. So Linda Heil. So welcome to Mr. McFadden.
Hey, one last time, hello again. I'm Mike McFadden from Eugene, and I'm going to impromptu switch directions from what I plan to talk about because I don't really think I have to say a whole lot more about the plaza issue. But I just want to kind of just maybe ramble a little bit about some of my general thoughts and perspectives about our current situation with so many of the issues that we've talked about tonight here as a group. And so about me, a little bit about me is that I was in foster care for most of my childhood and experienced some really severe child abuse throughout that time. And because of the situation in the foster care system, sort of experienced a lot of the failures that go on in that system. And where I'm going with this thought is that from a very young age, and not always to my own health or benefit, have been really mistrustful of adults, of other people, of what governments claim they're going to do to help people. And I don't think that that's unique to me. I think I might be a little bit more jaded than a lot of other people are. You know, there's so many examples of corporate America and government institutions on all levels, federally, state, locally, of dishonesty and deceit and untrustworthiness. And I think it's, you know, in addition to it just being wrong on its face, it creates a whole host of secondary issues where when that relationship of trust is broken or damaged, even when the truth is being told, it's hard to, you know, have people believe it. And so I think that we're in a situation where so many instances from even back in the 90s when Fen-Phen was being marketed, or any untold number of abuses by W.R. Grace Corporation, or, you know, a whole string of issues when we look at how money and power incentivize dishonesty and cover-ups and corruption, you know, and that breaks trust, and then, you know, relationships in communities break down. And so I really just want to use this time to say that I really think it's important that that we support one another, and that governments work to partner and be, you know, not separate from the communities that they serve, but that governments are really a vehicle that the community uses to help one another. And so, you know, I really think that with this mistrust, with this situation, it's, you know, really important that that those things, you know, that we acknowledge those things, and then, you know, I kind of lost my train of thought, but another thing I want to say that is really important to support law enforcement, and so in the idea of building a new justice center, you know, it's something that I actually do support, because as a victim of child abuse and crime, I was really helped in my journey by law enforcement professionals, and I don't know how old of a statistic it is, but I heard recently, maybe a few years ago, that 30% of the felonies in Lane County just don't get prosecuted because there's not funding to have a prosecutor actually take the case and take it to a conviction. And what that means is that there's people who are all across this county victims of assaults, property crimes, other abuses from other human beings who aren't getting the justice they need, and that contributes to that divide, that disconnect, when people feel like, oh, my house got broken into again, oh, I got burglarized again, but I know that the sheriff's not going to come out and help me, because not because they're bad people, but because there's just not the resources. And so as we develop the Justice Center and the courthouse, we really need to focus on those other two legs of the stool, which is the DA's office and the sheriff's office. You know, Patty Perlow really needs more funding and more help to prosecute criminals and to help victims of crime.
Thank you very much for your public comment.
Thanks, Sheriff Trapp, for his service too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Robin Bloomgarden, followed by Fergus McLean, followed by Linda Heil, and Michael Kerrigan. Welcome, Ms. Bloomgarden.
Hi, my name is Robin Bloomgarden, and I live in Elmira as well as that other person who spoke earlier. I have a couple things I wanted to mention. One is thank you very much for even considering allowing the public to be a part of what you're doing and us getting to know you guys in person, like somebody else said. So I'm really hoping that you could do this on a regular basis, and there's got to be a way that you could shift one day of the week and just like somebody said, move it till 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or even just 1 o'clock and then just roll through so we can have an evening meeting once or twice a month. That would be really nice. All the other local governments do that. And then we can come down there and be face-to-face with you all and hopefully have some input. So the second thing I wanted to talk about is I am one of those people who is really affected badly by 4G, and then when 5G comes, it's really going to affect me badly. And so I'm really not happy about the whole idea. I forgot what the third thing I was going to talk about. But anyway, thank you, and I hope you will do this on a regular basis.
Thank you very much.
And maybe a little bit later. It's hard to get through all the rush hour traffic to get here from anywhere at 5:30.
Okay. Thank you. So Fergus McLean, don't see him. He told me he had to leave. So Linda Heil, Linda Heil. And then if Michael Kerrigan is still here, yes, he is. We'll have him after you. So welcome, Ms. Heil.
Thank you. My name is Linda Heil, and I live in Eugene, Ward 2. I'm a volunteer organizer with 350 Eugene. 350 Eugene is the local chapter of 350.org, the leader of international climate activism. We have here in Eugene over 1,700 community supporters. I coordinate the Drawdown campaign, which focuses on local engagement in efforts to draw down emissions here at home. The City of Eugene has been inching forward towards an updated climate action plan for several years. Once a plan is complete, we will join many other cities, large and small across the country, implementing emission reductions in many types. Emissions from transportation, energy for buildings and water heating, waste management, and our consumption-oriented lifestyles will all be drawing down. Every jurisdiction must tailor an emissions mitigation plan to its own situation and needs. Lane County has this job ahead, and 350 Eugene looks forward to supporting your work on this. We are encouraged to see that a greenhouse gas inventory was completed by the Central Lane Metropolitan Planning Council in 2010. Of course, this needs to be updated. There are many guidance resources available to help cities and counties establish their baseline greenhouse gas emissions inventory and to build a comprehensive climate action plan. A friend of mine recently said, "I have no shares in fossil fuels, but I do have one share in planet Earth, and I'm worried about its value." This perfectly expresses why we will be coming to the County Commission to advocate for swift action to reduce carbon emissions. I read this week that the Kentucky Coal Mining Museum has installed a solar array on its roof. Let's emulate this pragmatism to address the realities of a rapidly changing energy economy. And I certainly hope my grammar was correct. Thank you, Commissioners, for your good work.
Thank you so much. Okay, so Mr. Kerrigan is still here, so welcome to
Thank you. I'm still Michael Kerrigan. Happy to be back. I join my 350 climate colleagues urging the county to develop a strong climate action plan. I have a 21-year-old daughter, Jyoti, and I want her to have a future, one without fear of having planet Earth going down. I urge you to work with my more knowledgeable 350 colleagues who are ready, willing, and able to work with you and county staff, importantly, to put together and then implement the strongest action plan that we can implement. Excuse me there. And thank you also for having this evening session. I look forward to more of these in the future. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone who has not signed up for public comment that wishes to present public comment? You signed up, okay. So maybe there's another sheet that I am not reading. Oh, one is coming. Okay, so, all right. So let's go with the following names: Mark Elliott, Ellen Furstner, and Loretta Houston. So, Mr. Elliott, come forward, and you'll have 3 minutes to present your public comment after you state your name and where you live.
My name is Mark Elliott, and I am a citizen of the city of Eugene, and I've been here for 10 years, formerly a high school teacher in Los Angeles. We were talking about your reluctance to use the emergency clause a little while ago. Well, we do have an emergency. Some people are less aware of it than others. I happen to be aware of it for various reasons. When you get to be 70 years old, you can see changes in the climate very easily. My own father, who lived in France, died in 2005 from a heat wave that hit France at that time. He died in June, and over 2,000 people died in August, mostly in Paris. Besides that personal story, my children, I have two children, neither of them are intending to have children of their own. So I'm deprived to be a grandparent. And the reason that I will not have grandchildren is because my children are educated. They know what's happening. I'm proposing, the reason I came tonight is I know you have very good intentions, and I'm proposing something very simple. It's twofold. One of them is I believe that the county has the power to install signs in places like the Arboretum, the parking lot, other places, the county parks, to install signs to encourage people. I'm a former educator, and I cannot prevent myself from trying to teach a little bit once in a while. Post signs about idling. You have no idea the amount of people who are annoyed by it. At one point, I was kind of knocking on people's windows and saying, you know, please, could you explain to me why you're idling? I don't want to do this anymore. I'm writing a book, a children's book about the quality of the atmosphere and how to save our planet if we possibly can. So that's one aspect, is idling signs. It should be very easy. I've already proposed this to Brad at the Arboretum, the director of the Arboretum. He referred to the county, which is fine. The other aspect is public transportation. I'm trying to find ways to encourage people to get out of their cars, including myself. We have a daughter who lives in Salem. She works for ODOT. ODOT has a bus called Point. It's too expensive. I would like not to drive my car when my wife and I visit our daughter. As seniors, it still costs us $15 one way. Two people, $60 round trip. That's too much. There should be an incentive, maybe a 50% reduction once a week, and maybe, if ODOT is smart, a free day once a week to prime the pump, to stimulate people to try public transportation and get out of their cars.
Thank you very much for your public comment today. So we are up to Ellen Firstner, welcome, and followed by Loretta Houston. And then if you haven't signed up, I'll call on you. So welcome, Ms. Firstner.
Hi, my name is Ellen Firstner, and I'm in Marcola. I have a story to tell you, and it is not for me or my husband, Lon, to get pats on the back. I want you to hear. There is a family, a homeless family. I met them a few weeks ago. I have a truck, and someone called me because they knew that I have a truck, and this family needed stuff moved from storage to storage from the place they were evicted from. A mother and two sons, 16 years old and 5 years old. A few days later, I got another call. The mother was in hysterics in Springfield in a parking lot with her 5-year-old and 2 dogs after an altercation with a roommate. She was hysterical. I went over there. I picked her up. She remained hysterical the first few days in our home with her kids and her dogs. She calmed down some, but she was never really able to function or to be a parent. The sons are absolutely amazing. The 16-year-old works full-time in construction, which he loves, and he supports them. He also bears the emotional load for the whole family while he is trying to study. He says he's homeschooled, but he's really doing self-study on the computer when he has time. I've worked with kids and youth my whole life, and he is definitely on top of my list of amazing, bright, intelligent, caring young people that I have known. The 5-year-old is a cute, bright little guy who'd wake up in the morning and go, "Lon, what are we going to do today?" and then help with farm chores. I don't know if the mental illness in the mom was long-term or if it was because of recent stress. I do know we were not equipped to deal with it. And I've been a poor single mother of 3 boys also. I have had teen foster kids in my home who've lived the most dreadful lives. I've been around the block, yet living with this for 8 days broke me. There was and is no solution. Whitebird, Occupy Medical, Trauma Healing Center, and private people are Band-Aids on a hemorrhage. They are back on the street now. The older boy is physically ill and emotionally wiped out. I don't know how the mother is. Right now I have to keep my distance, but I am keeping track of them. The funds people have been saving for permanent housing has been sucked up by hotels since they moved out. So now what? I am at a loss. People who are helping are at a loss. It is now the county and the city's turn to take this seriously and get into the act. I know you have been trying, but as Yoda says, there is no try. There is only do. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else who is not signed up that's here, wants to present public comment? Okay. Oh, you're Ms. Houston. I'm sorry. Come forward. And is there anyone else that has not signed up? Okay, so welcome, Ms. Houston.
Thank you. Loretta Houston, Cottage Grove. Is that too quick, too close? Okay. All right. So I'm bringing up tax day. No one likes tax day. No one likes to pay taxes. But we prefer to use our tax funds to pay for our collective needs, such as education, infrastructure, healthcare, housing, and our basic safety nets, which altogether is a very small % of the budget. At the same time, we are still subsidizing monocultural agribusiness, industrial forestry, the giant petrochemical industry, legislators' extravagant benefits, the greed and waste at the very top, self-indulged cost, and then hoarding money in offshore banks while getting massive cuts, which I call treason. And then the final nail in the coffin, adding tensions around the world to the enormous growing military budget, which ultimately destroys and leaves beings with deep trauma, anger, growing distrust, and an ultimate environmental toxic mess to try and rebuild with limited resources. But I'm here more specifically to address private industrial forest tax avoidance and Wall Street market shares. It's shocking after the housing bubble crashed in 2008 and witnessing more urgent climate chaos to see the timber industry machine log to liquidate these industrial forests faster than ever, which exposes massive acreage to elements, destroys soil ecology, inviting the most tenacious and gnarly invasive species to take root, to then justify amping up chemical warfare on our soils, wildlife, watersheds, and surrounding communities. I just want to point out when people rebelled to pay increasing property taxes in the 80s to cap at 3% with Measure 5, at the same time the private timber industry negotiated in secrecy to eliminate the severance harvest tax, along with a new land valuation scheme, Ballot 50, that the private timber industry pays no taxes on logging equipment, such as machinery that automates harvest, prepping and logging, which only speeds up liquidation and cuts out more jobs for struggling logging families, while no money is offered for training to transition out of a dying and destructive industry. Yet at the same time, small businesses pay a personal tax on equipment. Also, it's shocking news that private timber barons do not even pay state income taxes from their sales to export timber overseas. That's right. The state rewards greedy behavior to overlog while leaving our communities and ecosystems impoverished for generations to come. Then there is the timber industry taking advantage of newly paved roads. And there are numerous other externalities that the timber industry does not reveal nor take into account total costs to our economy and environment that most of the population is unaware of, which the timber industry takes full advantage of. Also, just to briefly point out, our greatest natural carbon sink here in the Northwest, our forests are used as Wall Street market shares. This only incentivizes more logging to increase profits for shareholders.
Thank you very much for your public comment.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Okay, so now we have time for the commissioners to make some remonstrances or other comments. And Commissioner Bozievich, go ahead.
Thank you. So first I want to thank everybody for coming to this evening public comment session. It may surprise you to know I was the one that made the motion to hold this evening meeting. So as we set the public hearing for that particular piece of ordinance that I knew was going to have public interest, I asked for it to be an evening meeting and to add public comment to the meeting. So happy to see people take advantage of that. Mike, I really appreciate your testimony about being a foster kid and that the mistrust and everything else that went with it. What I can say is, you know, and along with some of the testimony about homeless issues, is our housing improvement program grants that we put out. One of the grants we gave out was to Acorn, and it was to add 20 additional units of transitional housing for folks that were aging out of the foster care system as young adults, but needed a housing to get into the workforce, get some of it caught up, because a lot of foster kids, as we all know, we have the lowest graduation rate of any state in the country for foster kids. There's a lot of disservice being done there, and I think we're trying to turn the dial a little bit here. And I really appreciate, the comments about the thousands of people that are in need of affordable housing here by Mr. Brandt. Yeah, we can add 4 units here or 20 units there and 50 units there. It doesn't deal with the need for 50,000 affordable housing units. But we do have some affordable housing already existing in Lane County. One of the things we're having trouble with is it's not turning over because there's no move-up opportunity, because there's a limited amount of housing being built due to various aspects of restrictions on housing supply, whether it's regulations around tiny homes and backyard accessory dwelling units that are getting in the way, or it's our land use system that makes it very difficult sometimes to get approvals to build a residence. So we need to keep working on all those dials, whether we get, some government-built 4 units here at the same time trying to free up, those $250,000 plus homes, because those folks that are buying those are moving out of aging housing that will become the affordable housing of the future. And unless we can get people moving out of that, that won't turn over for those folks that need that affordable housing. So I really appreciate all the comments around that. And I have to appreciate the Raging Grannies and their discussion of civil discussion. Because you all are probably aware, with my physical science background, I don't agree with some of your assessments around climate. But the first thing people do when they hear that is they refer to me as a denier, and the conversation stops there. So I challenge you all to listen to some of my reasoning around the science and how I back up my assertion that it is not the crisis a lot of people are claiming it to be. Not that I want to increase carbon emissions. I am a conservationist from way back. I worked for soil and water conservation districts doing soil erosion work in the 80s before it was even heard of out here on the West Coast. So, I'm a long-time environmentalist. I just have a disagreement about whether or not CO2 is driving our climate and whether man is having the impact people think they are. And if you want to sit down and have a technical discussion of that in a civil way, I've done it with several people. But usually the first thing I hear is, oh, you're just a denier, it's settled. Thank goodness it wasn't settled for Galileo.
Okay, any other commissioner remonstrance? Okay.
Thank you. As I'm sitting here looking as the dusk draws in, it reminds me of the 10 years I spent on the Eugene City Council, where we had public testimony each Monday night that we had a meeting. They continue to do that. And I recall one time in June, the sun that went down there came up back there before the meeting was over. In recent years, they've changed, and they limit their public testimony. Thank you for being here this evening. Some of you spoke very eloquently, from your heart, and very genuinely, and I really enjoyed that. And Mr. New, I wanted to apologize to you if it seemed that I came across with a harsh response to you regarding our grandchildren being referred to with they and them as pronouns as opposed to he. You kind of turned around. It sounded like maybe I was a little bit harsh, and I apologize for that. But Mr. Brent, I was really stricken by your testimony. You're the first to speak, and two things were really cool that you talked about. You talked about bundling the plastic up and setting it in an area where you have it marked by GPS, and later on when we figure it out, bring it back out and recycle it or reuse it. I love that thought. Doesn't seem that difficult to do, does it? But the other thing you said is that there needs to be a group to talk about homelessness, and I agree. There does need to be a group to talk about homelessness. And I just want to pull this headline that I have in front of me here. It says a community task force on homelessness will meet starting, and it gives the date. It goes on to say, I've been asked to participate in a new task force to study homelessness in our community. The first meeting will be on Wednesday at noon at St. Mary's Catholic Church. It's the latest addition to efforts surrounding homelessness in Eugene. And it goes on to talk about the assigned charge. Now, I wrote this article on December 28th, 2011. So we continually commission new task forces on homelessness. And we get things done. Occasionally we do. The Eugene Camping Ordinance, for instance, came out of the Council Committee on Homelessness and Youth, which I chaired in the 1990s, which allows for camping, including the camping that we do in some of our parking lots. And we, every couple of years, a task force comes forward on homelessness. But Commissioner Buck mentioned a steering committee that started its work last night. And this is a steering committee, I believe. This is a steering committee that I believe is going to take a great deal of the work that we've done in this community for many, many years and kind of wrap it up into a series of policies for the cities mainly the city of Eugene, but also Springfield and the county, to embark upon a very serious path to redirect resources. We've always wrung our hands about not having the resources. Well, redirecting resources to the upstream elements regarding homelessness, predominantly behavioral health issues, mental health, substance use issues, and creating housing first units where we're going to put people who are suffering from medical imbalance, chemical imbalance, or substance use, and give them permanent housing. It's working already. We have a number of those sites. So we're moving forward, and this committee is the steering committee in response to the TAC analysis on the feasibility study for shelter and housing in Lane County. Keep an eye on it. We started last night. We have a very short charge, a very short window. We're due to finish by May. By May of this year, our work will be finished with policies to recommend to the City Council of Eugene and Lane County, the Board of County Commissioners. Look for it because it will be a measurable means of noticing how we are able to move forward on homelessness. Now, are we going to house everybody? No, we're not. But are we going to do things that are innovative? Yes, we already do, and we will continue to do so. And as long as people are paying attention to it, when I became the executive director of Food for Lane County, people in Lane County didn't believe there were hungry folks in Lane County. Well, as soon as they were convinced, and there are hungry people, even with Food for Lane County, there are hungry people in Lane County. As soon as people were convinced of that, they could not stand, for instance, hungry children and hungry single moms with kids, and they couldn't, hungry people with the behavioral health issues. So the same thing, the same mass is occurring with homelessness. More people are believing it and believing that it's not just because folks are lazy or just because they lost their job or whatever it may be, that there's a host of conditions that cause homelessness. And as we address the conditions, then we're going to be able to get a noose around it, lasso it in, and begin to address homelessness. Now, we're doing things that get noticed. Let's see, it was on February 8, 2016, I was in Tucson. My son was graduating from University of Arizona, again, his MSW. And I pulled up the Tucson Star newspaper. It said, homeless could get temporary housing. I thought, this is great. I'll take a look and see what this is. The sub-headline says, Citigroup looks to Eugene, Oregon for some options. This is in Tucson. And as I read the article, it wasn't about Eugene, it was about Lane County, quite frankly. So, you know, we're doing things. And I'm not going to say we're throwing a switch and things are going to change. But gradually you'll see that we are beginning to address issues and give people safe, decent places to live, and give people a new level of dignity that some people have completely abandoned or have abandoned years and years and years ago. So thanks for being here. Thanks for bringing our attention to that. And thank you. And stay with it, man. Thanks.
I talked about housing a little bit earlier, so I won't go over that again. I know a lot of you are here regarding Climate Action Plan. I'm a strong supporter of trying to bring the county into that fold. Frankly, I wish it had been discussed and planned and talked about much earlier. I know the part of the frustration is that things can't happen fast enough, especially in government. And I can appreciate that. I look forward to talking about that in our future meetings, and more than just talking about it and more than just putting together a plan is to be effective about it, to actually have some kind of results come from it, and know that the county is putting its best foot forward in order to address what it can in the scheme of climate change. And part of that, which I have a deep background in, is diversion and recycling. I look forward to having discussions within that larger conversation context regarding those two things, and reuse and product stewardship and those subjects that I am more familiar with. There are parts and aspects of the climate change conversation that I'm not as versed in, and I look forward to having those conversations as well. And I know, again, it seems like forever to get to the conversation, but we will get there. And I think we've got support on the board in order to move
in that direction.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I just wanted to take a few minutes myself at the end of the meeting here to give some comments and thoughts about what we're doing and what we could be doing. The first is a big thank you to the public that came out for this meeting. We were a bit concerned that if we had an evening meeting, because we haven't had an evening meeting in a long time, that there wouldn't be very many people. And I think that the public who came out for the meeting demonstrates that there's a big interest and a willingness of people to spend a part of their day with us. And I really appreciate not only people coming, but also making suggestions about how we could improve the evening public comment sessions that I certainly hope we will do in the future. Also wanted to thank the commissioners for coming to the meeting tonight, and including Commissioner Burney, who was juggling 2 other events. And so, you know, we don't have a board unless commissioners show up. And so I just want to thank colleagues for doing that. On the, you know, on the substance of some of the things that were brought up, first of all, the commenter who said we've got 50,000 people in Lane County that are below a certain financial level and can't really afford the housing that's available, and then commented about the City of Eugene enacting a construction excise tax so that they could build maybe 4 units, but there's 50,000 people. And to me, that was a really remarkable, you know, juxtaposition of statistics about what the extent of the problem is and what the city has done. But Lane County has not enacted a construction excise tax. We have the authority to enact one. I've suggested we pursue that, and I think that is still a good idea given the magnitude of the problem that the commenter identified, namely that, well, this is a group of people that really cannot fit into a market-based system of housing unless the government or nonprofits do significantly more. I mean, if there's 4 units built from that construction excise tax that the city is enacting, and there are 49,996 other units, we're not making the kind of progress to treat people with dignity. So I would just say we need to do a lot more, and that doesn't take away from any of the good that's being done. It just recognizes that there's a significantly larger problem, which brings me to climate change. Now, on January 8, I requested that the board set up a meeting with Ernie Neeme, who had written a paper on the economics, the impact of the economics of climate change on Lane County. The board has since decided that on May 7th, Mr. Mokrzycki, the county administrator, will be reporting back to the board on the current practices of Lane County. And then following that presentation, which will occur sometime after May 5th, May 7th, we will then have a further presentation by Mr. Neeme if that's what the board wants to do. I mention this because I think that we need to accelerate our efforts in the whole climate change arena. The problem is, in my judgment, getting worse faster than it was on January 8th when Mr. Neeme gave me his paper and said we could put it on our website. To me, the problem is accelerating, and we need to accelerate our response to the problem. And your efforts to propose things that might alleviate the suffering and financial implications and the economic implications and the social implications of the climate change need to be redoubled. So I'm not only asking the government to redouble its efforts, I'm asking you to redouble your efforts as proponents of change. Because if we don't use these opportunities of public comment to governments, to the letters to the editor in newspapers, to forums such as the one you're doing on April 11th, if we don't accelerate that, we will not have the level of learning and knowledge that we need to bring the policymakers along. And one last thing on a very positive note, the House of Representatives, U.S. House of Representatives, under the leadership of Speaker Pelosi, passed H.R. 1 a couple of weeks ago. And H.R. 1 contained a campaign finance reform mechanism that has really attracted some attention, and I really think that we should consider enacting something like that at the local, state, or national level. It takes the impact of big money out of politics, and many of our problems that we talk about have their origin in the way we choose our leaders in the United States. We have a completely different system of other parliamentary democracies. And people that live in the country, we're used to the system we have, but we don't have to be. We can change the system. So thank you so much for coming out. I don't know when we're going to do this again or if we're going to be able to go on some kind of, where I'm from, Coos County, we had the swing shift. Maybe we'll have the commissioners on a swing shift. That there are a lot of complexities to setting this up, and I appreciate everybody's willingness to try this out tonight. So anything else before we call it a day? And Commissioner Buck and I didn't quite make 12 hours, which is like 11 and a half. So, okay, thanks very much. We are adjourned.
My first meeting was at 7.